In the beginning of the episode we see Belle heads upstairs and immediately starts scolding the Sun Crystal, whom she calls Goo, for being so careless with the records while she was busy carrying out her duties. After spending some time around them, Hirako learns that both Belle and Goo belong to an artificial life-form species known as the Mercurials. Putting that aside, Belle asks Goo why their fuel reserves are running so low in the first place. Goo explains that after the human king finished building the castle and grew old, he handed it over to a group of young nobles. Those nobles eventually sold the castle for their own selfish reasons and personal profit. As the years passed, the castle ended up in the hands of the angels, who later used it during the Great War. That is the reason their fuel reserves were drained so heavily. Kyuden then asks what would happen if they completely ran out of fuel. Belle explains that once the fuel reaches zero, the ship will lose its ability to stay airborne and fall straight to the ground, which would result in all of them dying on impact. Hearing this, Hirako asks why they cannot simply add more fuel to the system. However, Belle explains that it is not that simple. The castle operates using special ancient artifacts known as sun stones, and those sun stones are extremely rare and very difficult to find in the present world. Knowing that, Belle calmly accepts their situation and suggests they should at least look for the safest possible place to crash in order to minimize the damage. This makes Hirako curious, since he has never heard of sun stones before, and he begins wondering whether Vargriff or Michael might know something about them. Belle and Kyuden start panicking at the thought of crashing, but then Lucy suddenly pulls out a sun stone from nowhere. The sight catches Hirako completely off guard because it turns out to be the same hot stone they discovered in their village not too long ago. Blee. He then sends Daga and Hakurin out to gather sun stones. When Daga asks how many he should bring back, Hirako tells him to collect as many as Hakurin can carry on her back because they need to hurry. However, after Kyuden points out that their current fuel supply can still last for more than 3 years, Hirako realizes they are not actually in a rush and tells them they can take their time instead. After that, Kyuden approaches Hirako with an offer. Once they return to the village, Hirako tells everyone that Kyuden wants to serve under the Great Tree Village. In exchange, he is willing to hand over the Sun Castle as long as his people are properly taken care of. Everyone agrees that helping them should not be a problem, and Hirako feels the same way. Even so, Hirako admits that he is more concerned about the Sun Castle itself. He wonders whether forming an alliance with them could lead to problems in the future. The others reassure him, explaining that the Sun Castle has been abandoned for a very long time, so the chances of someone showing up to claim it are extremely low. That is enough to convince Hirako, and he agrees to the alliance. With that settled, the people of the Sun Castle officially become citizens of Group 4, with Kyuden serving as their leader. Everyone is clearly excited about the arrangement. After the ceremony is over, Hirako and the girls begin renovating the Sun Castle. They decide that renovating it will be much more efficient than rebuilding everything from scratch. For the time being, their main priority is building homes for all the people who are currently crowded together inside the castle. Some time later, they finish plowing the fields, and Belle is amazed by how quickly Hirako manages to get the work done. She assumes that this must be the normal way things are done in the modern age and concludes that she is simply old-fashioned and out of touch. Senna quickly explained that this was not normal at all. Hirako was simply a special case, and most people could never work at that kind of speed. After finishing the field, Hirako decided to find out what the dungeon potatoes they already had in the Sun Castle tasted like. The moment he took a bite, he realized they tasted awful. The flavor was so bad that he could barely enjoy them. However, Hirako quickly added some curry seasoning, and the taste changed completely. The potatoes suddenly became delicious. The people living in the Sun Castle were amazed by the transformation and could hardly believe that such a simple change could make the food taste so much better. Not long after that, Belle was shocked once again when she saw the massive number of sun stones that had been brought in. The amount was far greater than she had expected. Seeing such a huge supply, both Belle and Cuzitin concluded that they now had enough sun stones to last for several thousand years. With that problem solved, their attention shifted to a new goal. Their main focus became finding a reliable way to travel to the top of the castle. Hiraku asked you to come up with a new invention that could help, and it did not take her long to think of an idea. She suggested building a hot air balloon as a test. The wine slime was chosen as the first pilot. At first, the idea seemed promising, but they were soon disappointed by the results. They discovered that the hot air balloon had very limited mobility. It could move up and down without any issues, but moving left or right was much more difficult. Its direction depended almost entirely on the wind, making it extremely hard to control. While Hiraku and the others were busy dealing with the castle's problems and trying to improve transportation, winter arrived much sooner than expected. Despite the cold weather outside, the Sun Castle remained warm and comfortable. The temperature inside felt more like spring than winter. Seeing this, Hiraku guessed that the king who built the castle had originally designed it to serve as a comfortable retreat during the harsh winter months. A while later, Cuzitin walks in and notices the beautiful flower garden Hiraku has been working on. The flowers are so beautiful that they immediately catch his attention. Cuzitin assumes that they must taste good as well. However, Hiraku explains that they are not meant to be eaten and are simply being grown for decoration. Hearing that leaves Kyuden completely shocked, because he has never considered growing something that was not intended to be used as food. Hiraku goes on to explain that fruit trees are especially nice because they produce beautiful flowers while also providing edible fruit. Thinking about that, he starts wondering what kinds of fruit trees he should grow next. After hearing this, Kyuden remembers that there is something he wants to show Hiraku. He takes him over to the crop fields, where they find the area completely overrun with tater vines. What surprises Hiraku the most is how quickly the vines have grown, considering they were left unattended for only 3 days. Seeing the massive amount of growth, Kyuden assumes there must be plenty of taters growing underground. However, when Hiraku pulls up the plants, they discover that there are no taters at all. The vines had grown so rapidly that they consumed all the nutrients themselves, leaving nothing behind for the taters to develop properly. Kyuden suggests that they could at least keep the vines around as decoration, but Hiraku immediately rejects the idea. He explains that if they leave the vines alone, the entire castle could end up covered by them at this rate. After that, reconstruction efforts and food production continue smoothly throughout the castle, and no major problems arise. Later that night, Donovan approaches Hiraku and tells him about a problem he has been struggling with. He explains that he still cannot figure out how to turn the dungeon potatoes into decent alcohol. He says he has tried practically everything he can think of, but none of his attempts have produced good results. Since Hiraku has no idea how to solve the issue either, he decides to ask him about it. And explains that she and the maids did everything they could to remove the potatoes' astringency, but all they managed to create was a strange gray blob. When Hiraku takes a look at the blob, he immediately realizes that it is actually konnyaku. He slices it up, which immediately surprises all of the maids. Hiraku sees it as a pleasant surprise because the original ingredient cannot be eaten in its raw form, so turning it into konnyaku is actually a successful transformation. Putting that matter aside, Hiraku begins thinking about the position of the Sun Castle. When the castle first approached them, it came from the southeast, but it is now floating in a different location. Since Gu does not like the idea of remaining in one place permanently, the Sun Castle changes its position throughout the year. It slowly circles around the Great Tree Village and completes one full rotation over the course of a year. Because of this movement, the castle's location becomes a way of showing how far the year has progressed in the Great Tree Village, almost like a giant calendar floating in the sky. Later one evening, Hiraku visits the clerk office. After spending some time there, Hakurin reminds him that they now have 4 additional villages under their care. Because of that, she believes it is time to create something that shows all 4 villages are connected to the Great Tree Village. At first, they consider building statues of Hiraku or placing portraits of him in every village. However, Hirako quickly dismisses those ideas because he thinks it would be strange to see his own face everywhere he goes. He says that he only wants to serve as the mayor and is perfectly satisfied with that role. Hearing this causes Florum to remember a conversation they once had about creating hierarchical titles to distinguish leaders from the mayor. The clerks begin suggesting grand titles such as emperor and ruler, but Hirako honestly feels those titles are far too excessive. He has no interest in being placed on such a high pedestal. To Hirako, the only thing that truly matters is that everyone can live together peacefully and get along with one another. As he says that, an idea suddenly comes to mind. He quickly designs a symbol that could serve as the new village emblem. The others take a look at it and admit that it is a very clever design. The others think the design is quite clever, so they decide to adopt it. As time passes, winter eventually comes to an end. Around that same time, Zabuton and her family finally return from hibernation. In high spirits, Hirako organizes a massive feast for everyone in the village. Once all the villagers have gathered, he announces the new village flag. The flag is meant to represent that all 4 sub-villages are united under the Great Tree Village. He explains that it is not about deciding which village is the greatest or most important. What truly matters is that they all live together as one community. With that said, everyone raises a toast to the new flag, and the entire village bursts into celebration. As the feast continues, the 2 demon dignitaries try some dungeon taters and find themselves feeling nostalgic. They remember how those potatoes were first introduced during a time of famine, when people were extremely reluctant to eat them. Yet somehow, Hirako has managed to turn them into something that people now genuinely enjoy. The rest of the evening is filled with laughter, conversation, and celebration as the villagers make the most of the occasion. Later on, Lucy approaches Hirako and asks how he is doing. Hirako admits that being the mayor is far more difficult than he ever imagined. Being responsible for so many people has never really suited his personality. However, now that an entire community depends on him, he knows he cannot simply avoid that responsibility. Because of that, he has devoted himself to making sure everyone in the village can live safely, comfortably, and happily. That's it for today. Like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.